Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Coffee, Buses, and Politics 7:30 a.m. series. It's 7:37 this morning, so a bit later than last week. We never managed to finish exactly on time because we always discussed a little bit what are we going to choose as our main topic today. So today we decided that we're going to comment on the latest on e-scooters, which actually in my ward in Cambridge, and it'll be really interesting to see if Stephen and David get emails about this as a counselor. But in my ward in Cambridge, in Abbey, I did get quite a bit of feedback from residents around the use of e-scooters. We have like a few spots in the ward in Abbey that have e-scooters. And of course, like the trial that's been taking place is taking place in Cambridge. So a lot of Cambridge residents have used with different levels of feedback, I guess, the scooters there. So we're going to discuss this news and then comment on other things around Cambridgeshire politics, what happened this week. So if you're watching, if you have any comments or suggestions or just questions for us about anything that's been going on in Cambridgeshire politics over the last week or so since we were last live, please do add your comments in the chat. So as usual, we are here today with Stephen and David, the counselors that use buses. David more regularly than Stephen, I have to say. And we can end our live stream as well, commenting about the best and the worst bus routes that we have done this week. But let's get on to the e-scooters topic first, because it's something that a lot of residents do care about, especially if the government is going to extend trials in other parts of the county. So there was a news article on the BBC and other newspapers recently this week looking at the delay to the new laws that the government promised over e-scooters. So those delays, of course, are criticized by various campaigners, residents groups who are expecting legislation in this area. Now, the government says that it will extend existing trials, such as the one that is happening in Cambridge City, to May 2026. Um, so this is something that a lot of campaigners are criticizing now. The government, instead of legislating on the use of e-scooters, is really missing an opportunity to tighten up safety rules and safety issues that have been raised around the use of e-scooters. Especially around those e-scooters that are sold on the internet, and people use them perhaps in ways that shouldn't really be used. But the news for you is that the trial, so if you are in Cambridge in particular, but especially visiting, traveling in Cambridge, this trial in Cambridge will be extended, it appears, so until at least May 2026. So I'm starting with Stephen. What is your opinion about the trials on e-scooters and in general e-scooters in Cambridge and beyond?
So in general, Cambridgeshire, it's not something that I get a lot of mail about in St Neots as well, or really particularly notice as well. So I think it's probably mainly an urban problem for Cambridge. I wrote this week that Cambridge's problems come down to a battle for road space between cyclists, between buses, and between motorists, but also it seems there's a battle now for pavement space. So I must admit, when I've been to Cambridge, especially late at night, I have been quite intimidated as a pedestrian by the scooters that keep whizzing past you on either side, because you feel like you have to constantly keep checking your shoulders. I also had a bad experience in Lyon a couple of years ago where they have this big rental scheme where the scooters just litter the pavements completely as well. So I do think that we need to keep the pavements free for pedestrians, especially those for mobility issues, which is something we're campaigning for in St Neots at the moment. And so having fast moving vehicles on the pavements, because they're not allowed on the roads, unlike bikes, I think is a problem. So I'm not massively in favour of them, especially in big cities where they're present in large numbers.
David, what's your opinion?
So I'm basically pretty skeptical of them. I haven't actually had complaints about them with my councillor hat on, but I'm involved in shop mobility in Huntingdon, and as well as doing sort of the scooters, we do wheelchairs, but other mobility aids. and people who have got reduced mobility, it is a worry for them. And also, in the centre of Huntingdon is pedestrianised during the day, and you still get people whizzing along on. I mean, you still get people cycling, and you get people going through on e-scooters. So that is it doesn't work. In Cambridge, but also in other cities I've been to, they're around and so on, and I don't think they work. I think the point Stephen makes about them just being left everywhere is very true, and you do see that they're just dumped and effectively block the pavement. And also they are adding another type of vehicle to. I mean, most towns, cities in the UK have old road layouts. In the road layout in Cambridge is going back, I think, well, certainly Vikings, I think earlier than that as well. If you're adding something to it, another thing that it's not designed for, it's going to cause issues. There is also, I think, an issue with, and I know this isn't everyone by any means, but and this is just based on what I've seen in Huntingdon. You do get some pretty inconsiderate people using those scooters. You do get people just using them to whiz along to work and so on, and fine, no problem. But when you see people riding them along the high street when it's busy, when the market's on, and it does cause issues. And you don't see that with that particular thing with cyclists. So I think unless there's going to be regulation of them, I think they're going to remain a real problem. But also the regulation won't work without enforcement, because at the moment that they are, you can't use them in Huntingdon legally. Unless it's true, unless there is a dedicated trial going on, you can't use them. But people still are. People realise that you can, and nothing's going to happen. So that's an issue. So I don't know if there's going to have to be some ground given, and maybe sort of say, okay, you can use them on pavements, but specify which pavements they can be used on. So I'm thinking that I can think of some, say along St. Peter's Road in Huntingdon, where I think it would probably be fine, but in the high street it wouldn't. But I don't think that'd be a great solution. And I'm not sure whether banning them is going to be practical. They have become popular, and I think it's worth asking as to why. And I think it is the basic problem with mobility. And I think that comes down ultimately to the problems with public transport. People are using these as a way to get around, I think sometimes because there isn't a realistic alternative.
Yeah, I think they're definitely popular, and I know there's data from the Cambridge trial, like how many journeys, potential car journeys, have those contributing to taking off the road, so to speak. So there is some benefit to be had, but of course, I think we have to distinguish between those kind of trials that are a bit better and what it is the unregulated use of e-scooters. And it was really interesting to see in this article, there is this estimate that there are 750,000 privately owned, so unregulated e-scooters currently in use across the UK. So almost three quarters of 1,000,000 of those scooters that are privately owned. So that is a very, very big number. So this is outside the trials, in many big cities and trials such as Cambridge. One of the interesting things with the trial is the limits on the speed, because when you rent one of those scooters in Cambridge from Voi or other companies that exist in London and other cities, you can't go more than, so that the limit is I think 15 miles an hour or something like that.
It's 15.5 miles an hour, and I wonder how they came up with 15.5 miles an hour. I'm going to work out what that is in kilometers per hour and see if there's some easy comparison, because it just seems a bit weird.
Yeah, so anyway, it's under 20, so it kind of fits in any kind of
it's
20
25 kph is what it is. That's why it's 15.5. But that seems like strangely European measure of velocity as well. So
Yeah, well, I think they start. I think like so those trials started in other European countries. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I don't think it started in the UK. So maybe they're kind of modeled over, like with European standards. But I think that what's important for those trials is they do have safety features, and that's what I'm really worried about, because some of those privately owned, if you buy like the cheapest, like and I want to buy something, let's say I can't get to work because like the bus is unreliable, I don't have a car, and I don't have a lot of money. And so like I would normally be inclined to just look on eBay and get the cheapest thing, like of everything. And that's what I do usually. And that means that they don't have the proper safety features. And we have seen what can happen, for example, with batteries, or some of the very tragic incidents with fires like going on, like because of some unregulated stuff that people buy from the internet that don't have proper safety features. But also safety features on the road as well, like having things like lights, like safety features, or like having this limit on the speed and so on. So I think the legislation is needed, just at the very least, in terms of the safety features that those scooters that are sold have to have by law, because there is a huge range of bad products out there. So that's before we kind of speak about like who uses them and the age. Like, should we have an age limit? Should we have, for example, like what happens when this happens quite a lot, you have to be honest about this, when people go to the pub on Friday, on Saturday in Cambridge, and say like, well, I can't take my car because obviously I've been drinking a lot, but I can rent one of those scooters back home. I have to say,
Is this a confession, Alex? Is this a confession about what you do on a Friday night or not?
No, I haven't ever used one, because I can't do, I can't be on a bike or anything. I don't have the coordination required for any of this stuff. So I'll be on a bus forever. So that is just like just me and my limitations. But I have been with friends who were like, after nights out, trying to like rent one of those. And I know you have to do like a test, like a reaction test on those, on some of those trials. So you're not like, if you're completely incapable of doing it, like you shouldn't pass it. But the reality is, and I have to say, even if you have a lot of time, even if you have like a lot of a lot to drink, you have time to do this test. So it's not like it doesn't really test your ability. And I've seen it, one of my friends doing it, and it's not, yeah. I don't think it really cuts it. I think you can be completely over the limit and get the scooter, and it happens. And then we have to ask questions about legislating around safety, because you wouldn't
it happens on bikes as well, doesn't it? People, especially in Cambridge and places, I would imagine, people ride bikes when they're drunk as well. Which is it against the law? Probably not, actually. I don't know.
Yeah, drunk. I think you can be drunk in charge of a bicycle.
Okay.
Anyway, nobody believes it wasn't you, Alex. That was all.
I really
also could not. I've never been on a scooter. I wouldn't trust myself not to break. I've broken so many bones from running, walking, and cycling that I would almost certainly smash my ankles in if I went on the scooter. So they frighten me as a user as well. It occurs to me that 15 and a half miles an hour though is really quite quick, isn't it? So if you think of a decent cycling pace on the road is about 20 miles an hour. I struggle to cycle at 20 miles an hour. 15 and a half miles an hour on a pavement is really quite fast. And
also, but if you think, I'm 120 kilos. I don't if you say another 10 kilos, for the scooter and whatever's in my backpack. If 130 kilos hits you at 15 miles an hour, that's going to spoil your whole morning. That seems, that's going to do a decent amount of damage.
Yeah.
I did take one of those for just to see what they're like. I like I said, I get why people would want to use them. I just don't think. I think maybe I'm changing my opinion as I go. Maybe we just haven't got the rules right yet. But I can see why people might want to use them. They're convenient and so on. I think there is something does need to be done around regulation and so on. The other thing is, I'm on the ones that you. I think there needs to be something about the not being able to just dump them wherever you want. Yeah. The rented ones. I'm not sure how that works. You see that with the rented bikes as well. They just get thrown onto the pavement, and that's not okay. But I'm interested that they're cutting car journeys, because my assumption would have been that these would have mostly been used by people who can't afford a private car. That was just my assumption. I've got no basis for that.
I think they'd be really useful for short journeys, wouldn't they? I guess so. Maybe people, just commuting across a town or short distances. I can imagine they would reduce car use and probably bus use as well.
Yeah, I was looking at this was for the trial in Cambridge. I'm trying to find if I can find any data whilst we are on this live stream. But they did the the scooters, like the voice scooters trial, and there is a report. I'm not sure if it was in the combined authority or some other committee that I've seen looking exactly like how many they did a survey looking at like how many switched from car to the scooter, like, or just had the scooter instead of like walking or perhaps biking or something else. So there is some initial data on this as well as some other trials. But I think it depends where you put them as well, because in Cambridge it kind of does make sense. If I was confident to use, and if I had the skills to use any of those, and if I was, let's say, in Cambridge North station and I want to go to the city center, instead of getting, sitting in the traffic in the car or on a bus, I would consider one of those for like a short journey that could take potentially a car journey off the road. And I think many people, especially for like evening activities and so on, like going somewhere in the evening, like it is quite popular, especially with young people. Like I see that a lot. But this also presents, I think, the issue around how do you even attempt to regulate antisocial use of e-scooters. And I don't only mean people who are, completely over the limit drinking, using e-scooters or bikes, but also because with those trials, you have to, of course, pay for them. What happens quite often, I observe people, I observe around Cambridge is multiple people using one. So I've seen many times 2 people on a scooter, or even 3, especially with smaller teenagers, children, and so on, because of course there's like an age for your account. So like I've seen many times people who are, of course, the person who has an account and then their friends are on the same scooter. But also I think it's an issue of cost, because if you're really trying to save money, of course those things cost. So in other countries, I know those trials were like completely, like some of the public transport is like free. So in that case, you don't incentivize saying like, well, I have to pay this much and I will take my friend and we'll just both go unsafely on one scooter instead of like each of us having one. So I'm not sure what creates it, but you do see it. And
you
it's
fancy
a
sharing a scooter with me, David? You and I on a scooter would be like being hit by a tank, wouldn't it?
I haven't seen any 2 councillors sharing a scooter, but I've definitely seen like children and especially teenagers. I have seen. So I wonder if it's like an issue around the age of not everyone able to have an account because there's an age to be able to book them, or if it's an issue of, well, everyone is of the correct age, but it's an issue of cost and splitting the cost of that. So that is an interesting one to look at, I guess, like what is called like antisocial use of them and what creates them. Whether people just think it's fun, or whether people say like, well, I just want to save money and split with someone.
I still go back to the point. I think this is a failure of public transport being provided. If you take the example of getting from like okay, and maybe it is until we solve minor issues like traffic congestion, maybe it is the way to go. But it should be easy to get from Cambridge North into the city centre or to other parts of the city by bus.
Yeah, so there's
and it isn't.
Yeah, I do agree with David on that. I also see this comment from Andrew here. Yes, that's exactly what I'm wondering, like, why is this happening? Because what I suspect happens is one person has the account. So let's say I'm 18 and my friend is 16 and I have someone else who's 15 and we're all on the same scooter. I do see this around my division in Abbey, like several teenagers on the same scooter. I've seen like 3 at some point, which is really, really dangerous. I mean, people like look at it and laugh and be like, oh, that's funny, but actually, in case you have an accident or a near miss, that is really, really stressful to see. But so that's the advantage with the trials, is that there's some level of regulation, in the sense that you shouldn't be able to to hire it, you have to like have this test. So you can't be like completely like over the limit with alcohol, because you have the reaction test, and you have like an account as well. So if you abandon the scooter, hypothetically, I mean, like Voi in this case, the company should be able to locate it and, you know, remove it accordingly and so on, and sort out and like probably, you know, discontinue your account at some point if you're continuing to do that. So there's a level of enforcement there. What is really I guess concerning for me is what we're discussing previously about the 750,000 scooters that are unregulated, that are not part of a trial. And then, yes, like everyone, I can go now on eBay and buy like a scooter, and I can be of whatever age, and I can take it out like out of my flat on the pavement. And if we don't have any enforcement or regulation on this, it is really difficult to control, unlike the trials that are more controllable in that sense.
I mean, interestingly, you're not allowed to take them on the train anymore.
No, or on the bus or on the stagecoach buses.
You're allowed to take a bike.
Sorry?
You're allowed to take a bike on the train, aren't you?
Yeah.
But the scooters you've got, and I think it's specifically because of the battery, that you've got sort of fairly low quality, non-robust batteries.
Well, but electric bikes, are you allowed to take those on the train?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, ironic, you need a car driving license. I think this thing I want, and then this may be impossible because of the enforcement issue. But if there needs to be some test for using those scooters, I mean, they're also in a slightly strange legal environment, legal grey area, because outside of where there's a test, an official trial going on, they are a motor vehicle, and so you can actually get, you know, even if you're driving them using them at 15, you can get done for dangerous driving, and you can have points on your license before you've even got your driving license. So, but yeah, I'm not sure. I just feel that they're being used. I mean, okay, maybe the trials are a better way of doing it. I think more needs to be done on making sure that they're not obstructing pavements and so on. But I still go back to I think they're filling in a gap in public transport, and unless I think maybe I'm talking myself round, because public transport is a problem that something needs to be done to allow them and make it clear they're allowed in some areas but not others, or maybe say you can use them in cycle lanes or something like that. But I think there is a training or a behaviour or a sort of being nice issue. Because, you know, I go back, you see them when you see people taking them to go to work on the industrial estate in Huntingdon. It's really not a problem, because it's very low pedestrian traffic. But then, you know, the point made earlier, you see somebody riding them along when the high street is busy, and in fairness, you see cyclists as well when the high street is busy. That's, you know, it's not unreasonable to ask somebody to get off and push for the length of the high street.
But people don't very often, do they? Well, some people, but most people
some people do, or take a different route. And I'm not sure. I mean, this is getting onto the whole war between cyclists and motorists and pedestrians, but how we just get people to be nicer and to think about others seems to be a real issue.
Which would be the real solution, wouldn't it? Responsible usage, where people didn't ride them on crowded pavements and didn't go too fast, would probably be fine in most areas, but people don't use them responsibly. And because there's literally no enforcement, it doesn't make any difference. So even if you do legislate against these things, as we've seen, 750,000 private scooters are technically illegal, but nobody ever stops anybody, gives anybody a ticket. I don't think. Maybe there's been one or two tickets for kind of showcases to try and make the point, but in general, if you own a scooter, nobody's going to prosecute you, are you? Unless you hit somebody and hurt somebody, and I guess that's when it gets worse.
Yeah, I think that's true on the enforcement point. Just on the comment there, you need indeed, so when you register with the Voi account to rent through the trial, you need a license, but it can be a provisional license. And that's where I think the issue is, because you can have the provisional license and have no idea how to drive yet, and no idea about the rules of the road. So like, I know people like myself who have it, because when you go on the account, it's either the full license or the provisional. Like, it's just for like the identity check as well. So you can, and it's so easy. It's why it really shocked me when I came to the UK. I did my license like 10 years ago, and the first step was to get this provisional one. In Romania, you don't have this. Like, you just have the license. When you pass the test, you don't have anything to show like before that. So I know why they do it in the UK, but it's really interesting because you technically have it and tick the box without actually knowing. And you can still have the full driving license, still don't know how to use the roads, like, especially if you haven't driven in a while. So yeah, I don't think that's like a test for like, I guess, responsible use, because you can be, I guess, not know how to use the road sensibly and safely either way. But that's like the other interesting point I think about the trial is that compared to the unregulated use, I think that's really important if we speak about safety, is that if you go through like a trial like VOI, for example, you do have insurance. So like, coverage for insurance covering personal accident. And of course, actually VOI went beyond the Department for Transport, like regulations around that as well. Whereas again, with the 750,000 unregulated scooters, again, what kind of insurance do you have for this kind of thing? It is a real safety issue. I'm just looking at the comments. There's one saying here, only time I ever saw anyone older than 30 using them was in London. That's really interesting. Yes, most people that I see in Cambridge are young, and especially it's very popular with, I guess, teenagers, people who are just probably the people who have the provisional driving license at 16 or 17.
There's somebody in St Neots who uses a private scooter and takes his dog on a dog basket on the scooter. So you quite at the annual carnival parade, he led the parade with his scooter and his dog on the scooter as well. So the dog just sits there in its basket and is wheeled around on the scooter, which I thought was quite interesting. And he's definitely older than 30.
Was that you, Stephen?
No. I've got 3 dogs. I need 3 scooters. I need like a scooter sleigh.
I mean, there's an interesting comment here, if I can bring it up. They should be handled like bikes. I think the thing is they're about the same space. The thing is they're a bit smaller and a bit more maneuverable, but also it's the thing that you can get them round tighter spaces than a bike. Or maybe I'm just crap at riding my bike, but they're, I don't know. I was thinking maybe they need to be included as part of cycling proficiency or bikeability now.
But it's the electrification bit is the problem. Nobody would be talking about regular scooters. Nobody cares about them very much. And there is this whole electrification thing is causing an issue with bikes, aren't there? Because sometimes you'd be on the roads where people are using electric bikes, which are no different than motorbikes as well, and riding around without helmets as well. And so I guess it's putting motors and batteries on these things, is blurring the line between, self-propelled things which don't need regulation and vehicles which can cause harm. The reasons why we license cars is because you can hurt somebody in a car, and I guess you can hurt somebody on an e-bike or on a scooter as well. So maybe that's the line we should be drawing.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the thing is, I think with e-bikes generally, they don't go unless you're pedaling. So there has to be, you don't have to do much pedaling, but there's some sort of human power there to drive them, and it's a battery assist. Well, with the scooter, it's much better. I mean, it's all battery. I mean, I think one of the things that isn't at all clear is what they're expecting to get out of the trial, and I do wonder if this is actually a case of kicking the can down the road. That now is going to be effectively impossible to undo it, but certainly without enforcement. And I do, I'm not sure what is going to be changing, what extra info they're trying to get from the extended trial. It may be that I've just missed that, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some reports as well. So like I was just looking here, like on the Voi for the Voi trials on their website. There's a few reports. People are interested in their data, after 1 year and 2 years in the UK, and like what they found through the different trials. And of course, that's in Cambridge City, but also other cities across the UK. So there are some reports and some other. I mean, there's also like an interesting article and some reports from from Transport for London as well. That obviously in London there's several providers. There's Voi, there's the Lime scooters, and Dot as well. So comparing the different providers and like what impact they had. I think it's really interesting how they started. Those trials started during the pandemic, and of course then it was a very different use of the scooters as compared to now. But like in Cambridge, I have to say they are used. The question is, as you said earlier, is how they are used, who uses them, like what are the safety concerns around them. And I have to say, as a positive thing, because so far we haven't really been a fans of scooters, and have brought a lot of like interesting issues around safety and around regulation. But one of the good things I feel with the trials and kind of the controlled trials is that Voi are quite at least responsive. So as a local councillor, when I did email saying, well, this location where the scooters are parked is blocking the pavement, could we reconsider the location? They have been quite responsive, and a couple of those locations have moved like around my ward as well. So you can't do this with the unregulated scooters that are just dumped on the pavement. But at least if it's someone managing them, at least you should have, in theory, a person who could review those locations and say, is it actually okay to put this parking space on the pavement here or not, or actually review it. That's one thing.
I mean, I think that's good. I mean, I'm thinking of when I was last in London, and it's a different company. It's Lime, and it may be that their bright branding is the reason I see it. But the Lime bike, so the other like official cycle hire system, you had to put the bike back into a dock when you were finished with it, and so the docks were in sort of sensible places, and that sort of made sense. The Lime bikes, you can just put, when you're finished with them, you can just put them wherever you want. And so they just end up being, and then even if somebody puts it in a sensible, reasonable way, they'll get blown over, they'll get pushed over, and they just end up blocking the pavement. And I know because I was actually going to the theatre with my mum, and we ended up having to take it, basically pick our way through a whole load of Lime bikes near Waterloo Station.
That's a huge concern. I hate that kind of pavement clutter. Is awful, especially for, I imagine, visually impaired people or mobility impaired people. That just makes it really difficult to get around, and everybody else, in fact, but especially those people as well.
Yeah, and it's that. I mean, and it's, I don't know. I don't know if it would sort of with the because the Voi scooters you can put back anywhere, can't you?
Are they on racks to start with, or can you just pick them up from anywhere?
The ones in Abbey, they're like usually like on quieter sides of pavements or like corners, or like some of them are in residential areas as well. But what it doesn't have is a very designated parking space, so to speak. You should, like, when you have the app, you should, I mean, it does tell you where to put it and if it's placed, if it's returned correctly or not. But then again, there's the people who leave them in random places. I mean, Voi say you should, your account should be closed if you have those, I guess, offenses, like, repeated and so on. I'm not sure how exactly it takes place. But yeah, in theory, the app should show you where to return it.
That should be part of the trial data, shouldn't it? How many accounts they have closed, because we can definitely point at incidences of antisocial behaviour. How are these scooters charged? In Lyon, there's a model where people, it's kind of crowdsourced as well, so people get paid to take scooters, take them into their garage, and charge them, because there's an app with GPS, and so if you're on a kind of charging side of the business, you can get a van and drive around Lyon or Cambridge, pick up loads of scooters, take them into your garage and charge them up. How do they charge these things, or are they charged on racks? Do you know?
No, I don't know the technical detail of that. I have to
It's
say,
intriguing, I mean, I love that part of the business model, that people just take scooters home, charge them, and get paid for charging scooters all night, that seems really great. So I guess that might be the same thing, but I don't know.
That could be interesting. Yeah, I see this article showing like on the smart transport website. I'm not sure like how it would be interesting to see like the data for Cambridge specifically or for other areas, but there's this overall article 2023 saying more than 12 million miles of car journeys were avoided across the 17 countries with the trials provided by Bolt. So like Bolt is, I think, in London as well, like not in Cambridge. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone did the research with all those different companies, because what I find is, like this report from Void, this report from Lime, this report from Bolt, but I'm not sure if any government or authority did like I guess an analysis of all of them and like what is the impact on car journeys, like I guess across the UK with all the different providers. Because of course from the company perspective, you do like to show that your trial is successful and you reduced car journeys and so on and so forth. But what I'm interested in is if anyone aggregated all this data across the UK. But yes, some interesting stuff online. Okay, we're nearing the end of our discussion. I think we had about 40 minutes on e-scooters, and I think we all agree that they are like the legislation is needed, so that the enforcement is enabled on this. And we all had those concerns around the unregulated use of scooters, and we are all looking into more detail about how those trials went, and now we'll have until 2026 to even, I guess, collect more data in places like Cambridge in terms of like what impact those e-scooter trials have on the impact on car journeys or other forms of transport as well. Finally, to end this live stream today, what was your favorite bus journey this week?
Ting. I took a Ting to St Neots.
Okay, how was your experience with it? Did it show up on time?
It's fab. And it basically dropped me right by where I was going to see a friend. It's great, and it's £2.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean the only, it's not really much of a downside is I have to go to the bus station in Huntingdon to get it at this end. But no, it's a good service.
All right, Stephen, have you tried the bus this week?
I haven't been on the bus this week, but I have been to a bus depot. So I went to the Whippet bus depot in Swavesey and met with Ed Cameron, who's their commercial operations manager as well, and I had a really interesting chat, a bit like the chat we had at Stagecoach. Lots of the same problems were kind of talks about how congestion inside Cambridge causes delays everywhere else and makes it uneconomic to run bus services, but also some interesting comments on the economics of trying to run a bus service with a £2 bus fare and how that was kind of rolled out really quickly and almost imposed on bus operators, and it sometimes makes some of their financial modeling dubious, or they don't have enough data to tell whether it works or not, and there's been an increase in numbers because of it, but it's difficult to say whether that's COVID recovery or £2 bus fare. So that's perhaps something else we should talk about again, is buses and the £2 bus fare and whether it makes buses more attractive and if it's helping bus operators as well. It was a really good conversation, and they're really good guys as well.
I think that's so interesting about the fares, because I always have, and I have in my groups of friends, very different views on this. So like, of course, you have people who think the bus, the £2, capping the cost. Some people say like you should go even further at £1 or like 3 or 50p or whatever as a universal offer. Like, would encourage. I'm really, really skeptical about this argument. I think the reliability and the showing up on time is much more important, especially in a city like Cambridge, where the average wage is higher than other areas. But we have to discuss this. I think like I have very strong views on this like link between the cost and like who you should exempt, and like whether someone like me who can afford to pay more than £2 should have like a £1 fare, and someone who can't afford should like pay the same. So I think that's like all like a very different, like a very interesting debate around generally like the use of like the subsidizing, and what do you subsidize.
And what's going to happen when the government ends the scheme and buses go up to the prices they were before? It's going to seem like massive inflation to bus users, isn't it? Which might be a discouraging effect.
Yeah, what I found really interesting, like without going into too much detail, is like how much the prices varied as well. Because in Cambridge, like it used to be, I mean, of course it was like more expensive, but it was not as much. I mean, the £2 cap reduced it, but in other areas, especially in rural areas, on some of the bus routes, the £2 cap like really reduced like almost like by 2/3 in some cases the cost of a journey. So like it's really interesting how it's actually like the price have been so unequal across the UK depending on the route you take. That doesn't correlate to the level of income or how much the average person I guess in a place would afford to pay. So that there's no kind of link to that in that sense in a way. So that's really, maybe for next time we can debate. We can debate this one. But yeah, my favorite bus journey, like it's always so difficult because I probably use a different one every day. Yes, I think, was it before after the last time we talked, I went to Bar Hill to visit the asylum hotel there. Yeah, was that recently? Like, I don't know, like time flies very quick in politics. So I had to get I had to get to Bar Hill. So I went to the Long Stanton Park and Ride. And I had to take, I think, was it the number 5, I think, towards Cambridge that stops at Bar Hill. And it is about, well, on Google Maps, 15-minute drive. But people who are local tell me like it's probably about like more like 25 minutes, half an hour, because if you don't want to go too fast from Huntington. And it took me about like over 2 hours to get to Bar Hill from Huntington on the bus. So it took me about like 4 or 5 times the times it takes driving. So yeah, that was very, very fun.
How long would it have taken on an e-scooter? That's the real question.
I don't think you can on that route. I don't think there's any. I don't think you can connect the cycleways on that route. I will have to look at it, but I thought in terms of the ratio of time, like driving to bus, it was probably one of the definitely not the worst. When I tried to go to Finland, in some place in Finland, it was definitely the worst, like bus to car time ratio. But it was in this area, it was one of the top ones. In terms of how close it is geographically, if we look like Huntington to Bar Hill, and how long it takes with the bus, and how the bus you obviously have to change, and how it goes around around Huntington and then like around like on the route to Cambridge. But at least it exists, like at least you can get there. And I have to be grateful, because in so many places you just can't get anywhere. So but that was my favorite. Yeah, there's a comment here saying came back on the bus from Bedford on Tuesday. About the £2 tickets. Yes, let's discuss next time. Next time we can do a debate around the bus £2 cap, and whether this makes people more likely or less likely to use the bus, and what will happen after the government will eventually, because I think will eventually withdraw the support on this, and we'll have to be prepared for that possible option. Okay, any other thoughts before we end this live stream?
No,
Okay.
you and I are off to New Shire Hall now, aren't we, for the Remembrance service as well, which is being led by me. Well, so I better start.
That's great. I can't wait to hear that, Stephen. I see Tom was watching us, Tom Sanderson. Hello, Tom. I am on my way to meet you now. So I'll see you soon, and see you as well, Stephen. There we have a meeting, Tom and I, before that. So yeah, with the Cosmic Committee. So I'll see you there.
I've got a really difficult to read prayer, which is like I'm having to rehearse because it makes no sense to me. So look forward to hearing me bundle it out.
You're representing the council. It's very important you do rehearse before. So definitely. Okay, see you both later.
See you later. Bye everyone.
Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.
Good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.